Welcome to Dial the Gate, the Stargate Oral History Project. I'm David Reed. Thanks for being here. I am thrilled to welcome to Dial the Gate for the first time, though I had him on at Gate World when the episode aired, Charles Shaughnessy, Alec Colson. Welcome back, sir. It is such a privilege to be with you again. I was a
Thank
huge
you.
fan of this character, and I am thrilled to see you. How are things going?
Things are going great, David. Thank you, and thank you for having me on. I'm very excited. As you know, we spoke years ago when I was on the show how
Yeah.
much I enjoyed it and just loved being in the Stargate universe. It was so exciting to step through the portal into their world, and as an actor, to actually feel that you are in a whole new universe was just fantastic. So when you got in touch with me, I was thrilled to reconnect.
And to have a character who had vindication about everything that he thought was possibly happening. I would like to start this nugget off or this conversation off with this piece because you were telling me about a few things before we started, and I really think that the audience will appreciate getting into it a little bit. I'm curious from your perspective, how important is the truth and how far should we be willing to go to expose the truth? And how
Well,
far is too
yeah.
far?
Well, it's a great question. And under other circumstances, going back to Covenant, it was a great dilemma. And I think that, yes, one has to be very careful at throwing on the population of the planet a paradigm shift that they're not ready for, to suddenly blow all the accepted norms out of the water. But ever since COVID, funnily enough, I feel that we're more prepared because those images of cities all around the world empty and
Mm,
the speed with which we normalize something that
oh
had
man,
never been seen before in
yeah.
the history of mankind, which is basically a worldwide pandemic that put everyone into their houses and off the streets. It somehow opened the gates to what we know as normal is no longer normal. And I think it sort of paved the way for further paradigm shifts. And it's interesting that between then and now, there's been this uptick in interest in UFOs and off-world phenomena, to the point where there have been official investigations now. There are members of Congress and the Senate who are on panels investigating. Marco Rubio is leading the charge to say if these exist, they are a threat to national security until we know what they are. So it's become very real. We've had the release of some of the videos that had been kept secret from Navy fighters off San Diego, the famous Tic Tac video. And there's a new movie now on Prime Video called Age of Disclosure, which kind of pulls all of those strings together. A lot of the material we've all seen, but this film puts it all into perspective. And one of the most remarkable things is a scene where they film in Congress. They actually have the congressional committee asking questions of these four people. Questions like, so you're telling us that this project, Legacy it's called, has been around for decades and that real vehicles, non-human vehicles have been recovered. And they go, yes, that's correct, Congressman. And saying that they've recovered bodies of aliens. We like to call them non-human biologics, but yes, we have recovered. And this is in front of Congress. This is Gillibrand and AOC and people that we know, straight-faced, no one's laughing, asking these questions and getting these shocking answers that, to their knowledge, this has been happening for decades, that has been covered up. The private contractors are involved because they are in a race with other countries and other corporations to reverse engineer this stuff. It's literally the episode of Covenant of Stargate, my episode, as a documentary. So they're dealing with those issues, like what can we tell the public? What should be official? What should continue to be investigated behind closed doors? How much should be revealed? So it's now suddenly a real question that has bandwidth. It has bandwidth, I think, since COVID, because we're sort of ready to accept the unacceptable.
Why isn't this all over the media?
You know, I think there must be very serious conversations going on at all sorts of levels, because none of the people featured in this documentary have come out and denied it and said, oh, this wasn't, this is taken out of context or
They can't.
whatever. It's just letting it sit there on the table. I think, it's like there was a line in Covenant, going back to that episode, where they said, you mean we should just leave it alone and see what happens? It's out there. Let's see how the government, see how people in power deal with this, because there's going to be ongoing conversations with members of the public who are going to want answers. And it will unfold in its time. But I sort of feel like we're coming to a kind of crossroads in this area, which again is why Stargate, I think, it's great they're redoing it, bringing a new series, because it's so timely. I mean, this is literally what is going to be happening in the newspapers and online in news feeds as this series comes out.
I have no words to follow up with that. I mean,
I was
crazy. Looking forward.
We're having this conversation. That's what blows my mind. It is crazy that human beings are actually having this conversation for real.
They've all but admitted to extraterrestrial intelligence.
Oh, I mean, they didn't. It's not even all but. I mean, are you telling us that for decades you have had possession of off-world vehicles and life forms? Yes, Congressman, that is true. Now, they're under oath in front of Congress. I mean, either they're all lunatics or this is real. I mean, I don't know where else you go with it. You can't, it's not AI. It's not, they're not just sort of in an informal,
It's a part of congressional record.
Convention. This is Congress.
Wow. And here I was just getting ready to talk about Tony Stark and Elon Musk and,
Yeah, and there you go. And there's, there are billionaires involved. There's clearly, they say it's always been these private contractors doing it, because government changes every 4 years. There's a change of, and they might, reverse. If you had started a program, the next lot would come in and cancel funding. So it has to be done at a level beneath the official level, the sort of the civil servant level.
And a company with resources.
With resources coming from private corporations who have a vested interest in developing the technology. And then the government is allowed to know, the Defense Department is allowed to know what is necessary, but only what is necessary. Is literally a need to know basis, keeping the government per se out of the picture, and then setting up these kind of counter information projects where you ridicule the person that's coming out and whistleblowing. There's this guy, Ray Elizondo, whenever, if he steps too far and says, yes, we've got bodies, they have a whole unit, the whole department to ridicule it and make it look like it's, rubbish. And a lot of people online talking about this age of disclosure are saying that's what this is, that it's trying to make them all look like kooks.
And they have dirt on everybody. You know that they have to, so that, like, imagine if every single private thing about all of us came out. There would be embarrassment on some level. So all you have to do is step a toe out of line. We'll just release those embarrassing, photos of you with that mistress.
Right, again, you see, this is what's so interesting about where we are, because I'm not, one of my favorite phrases, E.M. Forster, only connect, because things do connect. And it's interesting that we are in an age where what used to embarrass us and politicians, revelations that would have, finished a career overnight are no longer finishing careers overnight. It's like, since you've got all this stuff on social media, and you've got AI exaggerating things and taking things out of context, I'm not sure people are as vulnerable to embarrassment as they were. I'm not sure what you could have on a politician to embarrass them enough to, give you the $1 billion or whatever, or keep quiet.
Mm-hmm.
It seems that our level of tolerance for misbehavior has gone up, which I've always thought was a bad thing in terms of our society. But if it means you have no leverage over people, I don't know. Where does that go?
I suppose, to borrow from Covenant again, we just sit back and watch.
You sit back and watch and wait. Exactly. There you go. Well, I'm definitely watching, with great interest.
Man. So how are you doing?
So, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you enjoy the play? I'm doing great, David. It's been very enjoyable period of my career. I'm sort of working a little less than usual than I used to. I've been able to do a lot of theater. I just got back from doing a wonderful show at a theater I work at a lot in Maine, at the Ogunquit Playhouse. We just did Titanic. I played the captain of the Titanic. It's an amazing piece. It's a big musical. It's kind of operatic.
How do you do that live?
It's incredible. It's nothing to do with the Cameron movie. It's based
but the incident
more on the real thing. Oh, it was unbelievable. I'll send you a clip of it.
I would love to see it.
Well, maybe I could do that now.
Can I? Would they boot me if I shared
it? It's all over YouTube. It's if you go to YouTube and you just put in Ogunquit Playhouse Titanic, the launching.
Please don't strike me, YouTube. All right, let me have a look here. And this is you in it?
Yeah, if you do Titanic the Musical, the launching, Ogunquit Playhouse.
Okay, I'm not going to do sound.
And it's pretty beautiful sound, and it's on YouTube, so it must be.
But they still own the rights to it. But I will display it here for just a second. This is, oh my goodness!
And
this
it's
is fantastic.
It's just this huge set that changes, and you get levels, and it's the most beautiful piece of work.
Oh my! We are putting a link to this.
It was such fun, such talented people. So it's great that I get a chance to do things like that.
Wow.
My knee was giving me trouble, so I have to go up all those steps rather.
Oh my gosh, the engine room. That is amazing.
The different levels. It's sort of it was lit beautifully. It was staged beautifully. It was such an exciting show. So that was my latest adventure. And my other big adventure is a 3-year-old grandson who is just the light of my life, and so much pleasure. I kind of don't like going away to work because we get a chance to sort of babysit and take him every now and again, and there's just nothing more joyful than playing around in the backyard with my 3-year-old.
It's a paradigm shift.
Boy, we've got girls all over this family. My brother has 3 girls. I had 2 girls. My wife's sister had 2 girls, and then suddenly there's this little prince.
You have a paradigm shift when you have kids, and then you have another one when they have kids, and you didn't think that you could expand your heart with the range of positive and negative emotions like you can even more when you have grandchildren. Yeah. So I've heard. I don't speak from experience, but it's just extraordinary.
I know. It's strange. It's like with your kids, you have your first kid and you just think, I couldn't love anything as much.
That's
and
right.
Then you have a second kid and somehow your heart literally splits in half. And then you have a grandkid and it splits again. and you'd, throw yourself in front of a train for any of them.
Mhm.
It's an extraordinary experience. My wife and I just loving it. So
Wow.
that's been fun, and we've been sort of back in Europe over the summer. We went back to see my mum, who turned 98, in Cornwall in the UK. So we
Wow.
went down to see her and went up to Scotland for a trip. So it's been a great mixture of sort of of sort of work and pleasure.
Wow. One of my moderators, Anthony, he's from Cornwall, so
Oh,
it's very
really? Okay.
Cornwall. I have a
Oh, no,
hard.
they don't like
As long as
that.
he
I'm
talks
down too.
slow, yeah,
Yeah.
I can understand. I'm sorry, Anthony, but it's true. What? Tell me about Night Comes. What is this about?
Oh, Night Comes. Well, yeah, interesting question. It's a movie that myself and a friend of mine in Canada, um, we got involved. We found this script and we developed it with some other people, and we got it to a company that started shooting it, and they've sort of more or less, we're waiting for it to be completed and going into post-production. But like all movies these days,
Yeah.
it's so
Yep.
complicated, the financing, but it's sort of three-quarters shot. We're keeping our fingers crossed.
Okay.
It's a really interesting horror thriller.
Tell me
And
more, please.
I can't tell you much more about it right now because it's not it's not done,
Well,
but it's in the way.
the byline, or the not the byline, the brief piece on IMDb says, throughout recorded history, entire civilizations have mysteriously disappeared, and for two sisters living in the modern day aftermath, daylight is their only refuge. So
Yeah,
that's
it's the sort of a play on the zombie apocalypse idea.
okay.
But because it's about these two girls who have been surviving in that world on their own since they were 8 years old, and having to survive from childhood into young adulthood, they're sort of semi-feral and had to learn survival techniques, but they have vestiges of civilization that was left
Okay.
with them by their parents. Um, you don't know too much about the backstory, but it's a great setup to have this sort of sibling, what goes on between two siblings when the slightest mistake can cost them their lives.
I'm
Um,
loving this cast. Alexander Ludwig, Daphne Keane. I mean,
Yeah,
this
it's
is
a
a
great cast.
strong
It's a
cast.
great story. It's a great script. I mean, we're hoping that we can raise the last little bit of funding to get it, cross the T's and dot the I's, because it's a terrific piece. And as you say, a wonderful cast. So, like a lot of these movies, you see they you look at when they were first started, and it's like, wow, it's been in production a long time. But it's not that it's taken that long. It's just there are long gaps and putting things together and post-production and all that stuff. But we're optimistic that we'll get it done. And then, yeah, I think it's very exciting.
Okay. Was Colson an offer? Do you recall, or did you? Is that something you
I
auditioned
was
for?
trying to think. I don't think so. I think I went and met with someone on that.
Okay.
I believe it's a little hazy.
It's been a long time.
I'm at the point I've been, in this place since in my career since the Nanny, where strange things get straight offers, and then some things I go in and audition for, now have to send a tape in, where I kind of feel like it should be an offer, and then things where I feel like I should be auditioning, I get offered. So it's like it's too hard to kind of separate which is which. But personally, I love going in. I'm
Yeah.
not so keen on sending in tapes.
It's
I
all
know
it
you
is
get
now.
it, many times, and you can set it up the way you want it, but I like the energy in the room. I like
That's
to
right.
go in and have an audience. I guess it's coming from stage. I just like them to feel my energy and me to feel what's in the space. And it also gives the people that are casting it a chance to ask for adjustments.
That's
which
right.
then gives them the opportunity to see how good you are at making adjustments.
That's
Which
right.
I would, if I was a director, I would want to know, is this an actor who can come in with what their idea of a performance is, but if it's not quite squared with mine, I can ask, we can find a way to adjust it, which you can't do on it when you send a tape in. So, and I like them to know. I get a little anxious when I get offered something, especially if it's a complex character, because there's nothing worse than showing up for the first day and you get this sort of, yeah, okay, that was fine. And you
That's right.
just, your heart sinks and you go, oh, this is not what they thought they were getting. So I
I've
like them to know what they're getting. So
That's
we
it.
all start at the same place, and are excited to work together. I don't want anyone getting any surprises. So
That's it. I mean, it's unrealistic to be able to take 5 6 hours getting a piece exactly right. And I've had conversations with actors who have come on and worked with newbies who all they knew was the Zoom audition, and they come on to a set with 100 people, and they freeze. And it's like,
yeah.
oh boy,
Right. This isn't my bedroom. And,
yeah,
when I can like do it 5 times before anyone sees it,
right,
it's, and that's where I think, all my years on the soaps were incredibly important. People talk about, how you can pick up bad habits, and you can if you get lazy.
yeah,
But the facility for making decisions, creative decisions on the fly, and being so inhabited in a character that when the change is asked for, the actor gets out of the way and the character does it. Because it's a change that's within the character that you've developed yourself. That when they need a change, it's sort of automatic. You don't even have to think about it. That comes from working on the soaps, which nowadays, because of financial, economic factors, you really don't have a lot of time. You want an actor who's ready to go when the gun goes off. You're racing. So I think that training was incredibly useful and has stood me in very good stead since.
you rewatched the episode. Who was this guy before we saw him, and who do you think he became after we left him?
I mean, I think, there are a couple of people out there that we are familiar with now. I mean, again, another reason it's so relevant. These bazillionaire genius technology whizzes who are sort of incredibly focused to the detriment of everything else sometimes, and therefore vulnerable to either manipulation or some slightly dodgy decisions because they're going for the goal. And I think Alec Colson was one of those people who had a goal. I think the tragedy that happened to his family kind of isolated it, sort of narrowed that focus even more, so that all he had was his work. And with it came a kind of moral superiority, this sense of I'm a champion for the truth and no compromise. I think that can happen when you become tunnel visioned. Everything becomes a little black and white, and the gray areas seem to be a compromise rather than something pragmatic. So I think that's who he was. Who he has become since he's, been able to open the Pandora's box and see what look into the future, if you like. I don't think it's going to change his character, but I think it gives him a maturity that he didn't otherwise have. I think he thought he knew everything. And when someone who thinks they know everything is shown just how little they know, there is a little humbling that happens. It doesn't dent the genius, it doesn't dent the focus, but it probably does give him some more perspective on things. I'm guessing he's a more mature kind of person who's, instead of being tunnel visioned, has opened up to bigger bigger questions. So
Yeah.
it would be fascinating to see where he's got to, given time. I mean, aging does that to an extent, as you just simply the years humble you a bit and give you a perspective. There's a little less hot energy. The energy is still there, but it's not quite as heated. It's not quite as obsessive. And that gives you a chance to look at the bigger picture. So he's obviously, from his location, let alone psychological perspective, has a bigger vision right now, sees more of the whole than just a sort of tunnel vision of where we are as a species.
I see it unrealistic that you would find that man a pleasure planet to settle down on, and unrealistic that you would allow that level of brain power to lie inert, and B, he would allow that level of brain power to lie. That kind of person doesn't just stop. They keep
No,
on going.
they
So,
go on. And they said in the show, they said, wouldn't it, just think what this could mean if we had him on our side. If he was the guy reverse engineering some of the technologies that were coming our way, that would increase the speed with which we would be able to utilize them. So, you want the very best in the field to look outside the box. When you get something that you don't understand, you want someone who's ahead of the game to deconstruct and then reconstruct it for you. So they were very aware that he was going to be useful. I don't think they ever thought, oh, he's just going to go out to pasture like Wall-E and sit in the
Wally put in his time. He cleaned up the earth.
He's not going to be one of those guys sitting on those cruise ships. They're going to put him to work. And he would insist on going to work. He'd say, look, you've got me here. You've shown me all this stuff, this Pandora's box of where we are. Let me get to work with it.
There is, in science fiction, this nugget of an idea where, and Westworld executed this a little bit in one of its season finales, where you can have the truth. Everyone can have the truth. Are you willing to have the truth if it ultimately results in the destruction of your civilization and your way of life? And I think for Alec's world, the closest thing that he has to a brother, he loses. And one of the greatest scenes in the show is you sitting there in your office with that gun. And I'm being sincere about this. When Amanda as Sam comes in and assesses this scene, that's a real character moment, and that's great TV.
Yeah, and it's the moment that I think even she's obviously had permission, but even up to that moment, I don't think the decision's been made to offer him this alternative. But when she sees that he's come to the end of the road in the life that he's living and the life that he thinks is all there is, she opens the door to this alternative. And that little piece of him where I always make a joke with my wife that for me, the order of priority is Chelsea Football Club, her, and the children.
Well, at least he's honest.
And I think for Alec Colson, his work, despite all his relationships, despite all that he loved, even his wife and daughter and everyone in his life, they're all terribly important. But his work and it's the sort of the explorer, the essence of his being is discovering new stuff. He's just endlessly curious and endlessly interested in what is next. And when you say the truth, it's like it's the next revelation is incredibly important. So when he gets that offer, he puts down the gun
Yeah.
and goes, there is something to live for.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Those of us who are lucky enough to know in life what it is that we want, because I know so many people, and I'm sure you do as well, who have no idea, really are blessed. But
And cursed. I
you
mean,
can follow it off a cliff. You can follow it to your own destruction.
Yeah, because, and also you can fall off a cliff, and if it's denied you, you've got nothing.
That's right.
You know, I am kind of happy being in a space where what I want is what's next, and I don't know what that is. People say, "Is there a role you've always wanted to play?" You know, what role would you as an actor want to play? And it's a cliche, but I kind of do mean it. The next one, because if there's a goal and you don't reach it, then everything that you've done in the meantime is a waste of time. So for me, all of this, every second that we're on this earth is not a waste of time. It's valuable. So live in the moment. You know, people who know exactly what they want and have a goal, it's difficult for them to live in the moment because they're living in that future.
Yeah. I think that there's also a piece that comes with the fact that I found serenity in the now, and I'm not existing up ahead, because when it happens, you're satiated for moments, and then it's the
Which
next
is all there
thing.
is. But that's all there is, moment by moment by moment. There is nothing else. There is only moment by moment in life. There's no past, there's no future. There's only moments. So people say, are you happy? I would say, yeah, right this second, yeah. Am I going to be happy in 10 minutes? I have no idea. But right now, and all that matters is I'm happy. And if I'm not happy, that's going to change too. I know that being happy is going to change. And as much as I know that being unhappy is going to change, being desperate and desolate is going to change. It's all going to change. So you can only make that qualification at that precise moment, because the minute you experienced it, it's done. And you're not experiencing the future. So there are only moments. There's no such thing as a state of happiness or a state of misery. It doesn't exist. It's impossible to exist. It's moment by moment by moment by moment.
I think it's really interesting that a character that is hell-bent on such clarity can be so blinded even to his best friend's needs that he can't communicate.
Yeah.
He can't, Brian can't communicate what it is that's happening to him. His family's being threatened, for heaven's sake. And he can't make his own best friend, who happens to be his boss, slow down to the point where he ends his own life. And Colson is so hell-bent on discovering what it is that he feels the public deserves to know that it blinds, like you said, to everything else. And it's there is in pursuit of a greater good, a public good, perhaps the public trust, a selfishness that encompasses him in that.
Yeah. Yeah, but we know that we've seen them. I mean, we've seen those people. We know them who have, and I think in Colson's case, there's a need to have something to focus on, to keep the noise out, to keep his grief.
That's right.
And distract him from his grief. But also, he's someone who needs to justify that focus, that selfish focus, with a sense of moral superiority, which is this obsession with bringing the truth out. You know, the humanity deserves the truth. The truth is what's important. And it's a kind of moral superiority, a moral perspective where he sees himself as this kind of, King Arthur in search of the Holy Grail. It's like the Holy Grail is the truth and nothing will compromise it. And it comes from a sort of bit of a moral superiority, which then can excuse everything he does in pursuit of the truth. You know, yes, I'm, losing friends and
Too
not
bad.
listening. It's too bad. The truth is all that's important. And that's what I'm about. I'm a warrior for truth. So I get to do these things that you disapprove of. And it's hollow. And he realizes
Yeah.
at the end, hollow.
Yeah. It's a great moral tale. And I think that we can apply it to all kinds of things in our own lives. At the end of the day, that's what good story does. And sci-fi does that particularly well
Oh, yeah.
because it disguises itself in all kinds of things in order to be accessible to us in ways that we don't necessarily expect. And at different points in our life, as we hit different milestones on our own road.
Really.
But there are some characters that are just and stories that are just perpetually relevant. And
Right. And inside like science fiction and because science fiction, you can, as you say, you can blend mythology as well. It's like everyday stuff with a sprinkling of mythology, situations and characters echo the great stories of literature, the stories that have been told since we sat around a fire in front of the cave, through the Greeks, through the ancient civilizations, through all the centuries that we've known. They're the same stories. There's usually hubris, there's man's arrogance, there's usually some sort of jealousy. There's all those things that there, the great adventure. And so with science fiction, you can tell them, and if the playing field gets too constrictive, then you take it into outer space.
that's exactly right. Up in an F-302 that he helped build. So
Yeah.
we opened the show with the darn thing, for crying out loud. So.
Yeah.
LEW wants to know what part of filming that was your favorite, if you recall.
I think flying the plane was, I love planes. I love flying.
Do you fly?
I don't, but my wife kind of wouldn't let me. There was a time when I was thinking about it. I went up with a friend in a plane. We did aerobatics over Santa Monica Airport, which I loved. And I also got the chance to fly in an F-18 with the Blue Angels.
Oh, nice. You strike me
God.
as being a pilot. My dad's a pilot. I was this close to being one. So
it was so fantastic. So yeah, so climbing into that, and they do it so well that you kind of can suspend your own disbelief.
This is easy.
I mean, that excitement you saw on Alec Colson's face was kind of on mine. I was in a candy store. So all of it, I just loved all it. And it was such a great experience. I remember it, and clearly how thrilled I was. The people were so nice. Amanda was just the funnest person to work with.
Yeah.
I loved working in Vancouver. The crew and everyone in the creative team were just top of the game. So professional, so efficient. It was working like clockwork. It was just fun, just every bit of it.
Emma Bentley, 7945. This may be putting this may be hitting it too square on the head. But Emma says, watching Covenant a few days ago, I can't help but notice a commonality to Elon. What is your view on Alec's similarity to Elon? He always struck me more as a Howard Hughes type. Father was a reporter.
Yes,
but definitely self-made.
Self-made and a sort of entrepreneur. We never really in the show, it was talked about that he was personally a genius. But it's possible with Alec Colson, and my take on him was he was as much an entrepreneur, rather like Howard Hughes. He knew the sort of basics really well, right, and he would recognize talent. But exactly. I think he hired Elon Musk to work for him. He didn't have the same, I think at the level that Elon's at, and Elon's talked about it in, a lot, and certainly Isaacson in his book, he's sort of on the spectrum. I mean, he's like that sort of genius that finds it hard to feel certain emotions that are normal to the rest of us.
He can't quiet the noise, that's for sure.
Can't quiet the noise. doesn't have a lot of bandwidth for people that can't keep up with him. If you don't understand what he's saying, then just leave the room. He's not going to sit and explain it at great length. A little lack of compassion in that way, but focused the same way, and a vision of what he wants to do that Colson has. I mean, definitely, if you take that sort of group of billionaire, entrepreneurial, innovative scientist types like the Howard Hughes, Elon, who else? Jobs, Steve Jobs, that sort of group. Then yeah, I think that Alec Colson certainly fits into them.
I think I was trying to think about the episode. I don't think he ever indicates that those designs, the engineering designs, were his. But I think you're right that he does know how to cultivate the right talent, and that's just as key as anything. If we're talking about what comes out of the box at the other end.
Right. I get the sense that that's who he is. There was a show I loved on AMC called For All Mankind, and
Ron Moore.
Did you see it? I thought it was wonderful.
It's on my list. We're waiting for it to finish.
It is so great. You'll absolutely love it. I was so committed to that show. But there's a character there who's clearly the same sort of thing. He has this company. He's a brilliant engineer, but he's more of an entrepreneur. He's hired and recognizes talent. He knows almost as much as the people he's hired, but his real genius is knowing who to hire and being the kind of conductor. And I think Colson is that. He's a bit more of the conductor of the orchestra than the lead violinist.
Exactly. Lockwatcher wants to know, you've performed in over 1,300 episodes of daytime dramas. How does the work on a day-to-day series like this compare off to a visit to Stargate or another series? What's the level of intensity there? What does the prep entail? What kind of an experience is it like in comparison?
It's very different. Daytime, first of all, it depends. If you're like at the beginning, when I was not used to the speed of it and the amount of work, and my character had a lot to do, it was pretty overwhelming. You'd get 30 pages of dialogue and these complex scenes that you had to do incredibly fast. But as I said earlier, once you've got a character created, then it's like the actor leaves himself behind, and the character, learns the lines and does the scenes so that they can throw a curveball at you. And you know exactly how to do it because your body is now no longer yours. So if they say, don't come in the door, come in the window, you don't have to think about it. Well, how would I come in the window? The character does it in character. So, and because it's so fast and you're doing it on a daily basis, that character stays with you a little more. You're sort of inhabiting it for that period of your life almost. Whereas when you go and do a show like that, you have more time to prepare. It's a bigger production. There's a certain kind of, you can sit back a little into the performance. You can actually play around a little more. There's more time and space to find little details in the moment and with the other actor. As a stage actor, I love the rehearsal process. I love working with other actors and finding moments. And so on a show like that, and on daytime, we would work things off camera. We would rush into each other's dressing rooms and run scenes and find those moments. But it was always under terrific pressure of time pressure. Whereas on a show like Stargate or a 1-hour drama, you do have that luxury of a little more time to work with each other and find those moments. But the sort of the bones of it are the same. It's the same. It's the acting is the same job.
The thing that stuck out to me, what you said, is that it sounds to me like you're letting the character take over in certain cases. You know this individual inside and out so much that you literally are not making the same choices in your active mind with this role as you would uh, with this as you would with yourself. And I have done so in writing, in creating a character where there's also ultimately like a multiple personalities thing happening for me, where
Right.
I write an action, and it's almost like the character turns to me and says,
Right.
"I'm not doing that. No,
I
that's
wouldn't do
not
that.
this. That's not what I am."
Right, exactly. I think that's a great point. As a writer, absolutely. My dad was a writer, and the same thing. His characters could not say a line, and as you say, the character would almost get off the page and say, Fred, what are you doing? This is not. I would never say this. I'd never do it like this, or I'd never be in this position. And he'd have to rethink it. And you just instinctively know that that's not right. And go back and do it well, because once you've got that character, yeah, they sort of write themselves. Their dialogue is kind of, they do it for you. It's hard to explain, but yeah, I think a writer, probably even more than an actor, knows what I'm talking about. That these characters will tell you what they're going to do.
How do you reach that? How do you reach that as a performer and just allow that
Um,
to happen? Do you just trust at a certain point that
You
it's going to
trust the
be there?
process. It's that
Okay.
old cliche. I'm sure it's the same as the writer. You trust the process. It's why I love doing this. It's why I was, interestingly enough, I recently was, just because I'm sort of tiddling around writing a memoir of sorts, a book. So I've been thinking a lot about things and about why I became an actor and what it is I do. And is it a thirst for appreciation and the applause and the attention? And I honestly don't think it is. I honestly believe that it's just that, what we've talked about. It's a Zen, it's almost like a Zen process. One meditates in order to leave your chattering, conscious, self-conscious mind away, put it away, and be in a state of meditation, which is living in the moment. It's like we talked about, it's all full circle, moment by moment by moment. And acting does that. You put Charles Shaughnessy away, you inhabit this completely other person who's existing in this sort of make-believe realm, and you have to, if you're successful, you're in flow. You are speaking and reacting and living in a state of flow, which has nothing to do with the chattering self-consciousness of Charles Shaughnessy. It's in action. It's in that character's action. That's all that happens. When I say action, their emotions, their reactions, their thoughts, processes, but it's always manifested in action. You don't watch a movie of a character sitting in a chair just being anxious for 2 hours. As a human being, one can easily lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, chattering away and being anxious. That doesn't make great TV. What makes great TV is if you do 10 seconds of that and then suddenly the intruder comes through the door or whatever. But in performance, there's always action. So it's a privilege to be an actor and to be paid to live in that realm of meditation that is acting. Same as writing. I'm sure you find as a writer that when you're in flow, when you're in that process and it's going really well, the chatter up here, there's no room for it. It's left aside. You don't realize how hungry you are. You don't realize how tired you are.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. You've forgotten all about it. You're just in flow. And it's deeply satisfying. It can be exhausting. You can come out of it and be, wow, I need to go to bed for a day. But it's deeply satisfying to be in that state of flow.
Yeah, it's kind of wild where it's because I even forget to use the bathroom in certain cases. I'm just hammering
Yeah.
away at the keyboard, just trying to get this thing out to scratch that itch,
Right.
because
It's
something
true.
needs to
And
be
it's the
said.
same. Yeah, it's exactly the same. It's the same process with acting, and you trust the process, and your, whatever you want to call it, talent, experience, know how to get there. And if you don't get there, you got to look at what's not working. Something's not working. It's like with writing. If this isn't working, this scene, this chapter isn't working, I've got to go back and see what's wrong, because something's not right. There's a piece of the machinery that is out of whack. If I can find that and polish it and put it in the right place, back to flow.
Wow. Lily wanted to know, she's a newer fan. She's wanting to know if we can expect to see you at any conventions in the future.
You know, it's something that I'd be very, I'd love to do. I mean, a specific convention. I've not really done any. No one has suggested it. I've never had a role that's been an arc that sort of merited it, I guess. But I think it would be fantastic to meet the fans and to, you know, to both represent the characters. Is, you know, what we've been, this is sort of theme of the conversation, represent Alec Colson as Charles Shaughnessy, almost be at a convention as two people. You're Charles Shaughnessy, but paying homage to and representing Alec Colson, who I'm very aware is a character enjoyed by the audience, by the fans. So there's a kind of interesting level at which there's a suspension of disbelief.
That's right.
They know that I'm an actor, but they also love the character. So to play with that in a convention setting rather than on a set where you're just presenting Alec Colson, but to be Charles Shaughnessy going and answering questions for Charles Shaughnessy and for Alec Colson would be fascinating.
Yeah, Ronnie Cox was really good about that, as he played Robert Kinsey in Stargate, whom he called, I forget the name of the guy from Doctor Strangelove and Orrin Hatch, like put together. Not so much Orrin Hatch, but like just the character. I forget the name of the character who's. It's kind of a wild, and so but when I would
which one in Strangelove, the Colonel?
I think possibly yes, and he's every time I would sit down and talk with him, Ronnie would just go into this riff of like, well, you know, the Stargate program should be shut down, and it's like, dude, he slips into him so easily and just gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Right, that was Colonel Jack Ripper.
That's it. That's exactly it. My gosh, the bodily fluids.
Yeah, the precious bodily fluids.
God,
you know, Mandrake. He's talking to Mandrake. You understand, Mandrake? They're after precious bodily fluids.
Well, something tells me there's going to be more Stargate conventions in the future, and I would love to see you at one because I think that you would have a great time and have a lot to say.
Great, I would love it. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm ready, willing, and able.
There we go.
As they say, tanned, rested, and ready.
A couple more, and then I'm going to let you go here. Any news in reprising Tumwater Troy? Any news in reprising Shane Donavan on Days of Our Lives?
Well, he comes back every now and again. You know, I was back. It's very difficult to know because they write these things 6 months ahead and then they tape them like a year ahead.
Oh.
So I did go back when we lost Drake Hogston, which was such a tragedy. So the show lost John Black, the character he was playing. So we had this really tragic, sad, but also very wonderful memorial service for John Black, which was kind of a memorial for Drake. And I was back for a few days then. And then Shane always goes, you know, sayonara and leaves. And I'm always like, well, can't he sort of hang around for a little? Because I'd love to do that. I mean, I think, you know, I've made no secret that I love my time on daytime. I enjoy the process. I enjoy the fact you do something new every day. It's in town, so you don't have to travel. So yeah, I would be very. Shane is also packed and ready whenever they choose.
Is Days of Our, is it the last standing soap? There's not that many of them.
They're all LA shows now. There's Days, General Hospital, and then the two CBS,
They're
Young and
still
Restless
around.
and Bold and Beautiful.
They
But all
are.
the others have gone. Those are the only four standing.
Wow. Man, oh man. I
Yeah.
went through a couple of years on All My Children with my mother, and then over like a couple of summers, and at a certain point, I was like, "Oh, this never ends. I can't keep up with this."
I know. Oh, you get sucked into it. When I first came out here in '83, and I had a job working in a fabric store or something, and myself and my colleague would have lunch between 12 and 1 or 1 and 2. So it was always One Life to Live or General Hospital. And I got completely caught up in
You
them
do.
to the point where when I then was on days and Robert Woods, who played Bo Buchanan on One Life to Live, he came and did a character on days for a couple of years. And I found it very difficult doing scenes with him. I said, sorry about this, Bob, but you're Bo Buchanan. I don't know who else to call you. So that was kind of fun. But yeah, that you get hooked on those things very quickly.
A quick comment before I get to my last question. Ellen Busher, 771. Hi, Charles. I did in-home community support work a few years ago, and one gentleman had suffered a stroke and didn't understand English, but would rewatch reruns of The Nanny, and he smiled constantly through that.
Nice.
To be remembered for such a great show. I mean, it'll be on your epitaph. That's really special.
It is special. I mean, I realized that quite early on when, I've heard those comments, that my, whoever will write and say my grandmother was in hospital and she was dying of cancer, but, she'd look forward to the days that I'd come over, we'd watch The Nanny together, and it made our time together and so happy. And it's like, wow, I thought I was just doing a job. I thought I was just showing up and being very well paid to do a sitcom. And then you realize that you've actually touched people's lives in a much more profound and important way than you realized. And that's incredibly humbling and wonderful. And I appreciate it so much that's how it works. And it wasn't me, it was all of us. It was the writers, the director, but that thing that we created touched people's lives that deeply is incredibly satisfying and fulfilling.
You must be really proud of Fran.
Yeah, she's a force of nature. I always say that. She's like, I don't know anyone like her. She's got a heart as big as Montana. She'll take anything on. And, when she became president of SAG-AFTRA, and she was like, I'm going to unite this union. And she was there were two sides, and I was on the other side, I thought. And I said, I'm really on the other side of you. And she said, well, I'm just going to put us together. And I thought, no one in decades has been able to unite this union. There are so many different feelings, especially since it became SAG-AFTRA, it merged. I said, no one's going to be able to put this together. And she did. She got the union all on one page and, negotiated a very tough period for the union. She's amazing. She'll just do whatever she sets her mind to. I mean, I'm keeping an eye on her because I have a feeling she'll be on the ballot. Something higher office than just the president of a union soon.
One of my Hollywood friends was like, never underestimate the people whose most well-known credit is a more ditzy role. You underestimate them to your peril. So
I would never underestimate that.
Exactly right. Last question for you. Raj wanted to know, with the news of a new Stargate continuation series, would you be game for coming back for this character? And what would you think that he would be? What do you think that he would do?
If he did. I ever since I did that episode and he kind of went off world and that was it, I thought, this is really interesting to have a character almost do a character development, like evolve as a character off screen. You know, we've seen him get to that moment where he puts the gun down and Sam offers him a new life to reevaluate everything that he's been about. And then we don't get to see it. And I've always thought, wow, wouldn't it be interesting to drop back in years later, given where he is and given the technology he's been exposed to and the opportunities he's had and the perspective he has? Wouldn't it be interesting to see where he is and what he's doing now? So when I saw that this was happening, yeah, my first thought was, I wonder what Alex did. So yeah, I think it would be, I mean, I think it would be fascinating. I've made no secret of how I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my episode, just loved being in that universe, and with those people and those ideas. So I'm tanned, rested, and ready, packed and ready to go.
They just stuffed him between the sofa cushions. You can't keep a person like that down for long.
Like,
you can't.
Well, yeah, and you established there was so much sort of. It's one of those things where, as he left the scene, there were echoes. There was sort of like there were little echoes of his presence, his character, and what he did that was sort of out there. You know, usually a character leaves and there's a door shuts and complete. This was so incomplete and almost the opposite. It was sort of launching off camera into something really interesting. So yeah, I think it would be fascinating to go back and see where that's gone.
That's the thing with Stargate, now more than ever. It is a continuing story, and people weave in and out in the most unexpected ways. And that's the thing that I'm looking forward to with Martin Garrow's next series. Not the stuff that I would love to see, but the stuff that I'm not expecting to see. Right. And maybe people in places that in some cases we have seen before, but in new ways. And
new ways, yeah. It won't be linear. Nothing in life.
It's not life.
And certainly in fiction, but certainly not in life, is linear. He's not going to be, just speaking of Alec Colson, he's not going to now just be sort of grayer and older and wiser and still doing what he did. He's going to have had epiphanies. He's going to have had different circumstances mold and change him. But a character that has that sort of energy, that kind of drive, that kind of aliveness is a sponge for new opportunities and new directions, for good or for bad, for positive, for negative, who knows? But put into that universe, there's a lot of potential, I think. So yeah, it would be fascinating to see, and certainly a lot of fun to play around with that.
Yeah,
back in that sandbox.
And from a narrative perspective, he's a wild card. So
yeah,
he can go.
Well, it's a bit of a blank piece of paper, you know. It's like there's nothing nicer than sort of something that's been sketched in one place, and then off camera has been wiped clean, other than certain aspects. But there's a blank piece of paper now to be written on, which is, you know, as a creative, as an actor, I think that's exciting.
Charlie, thank you.
David, it's been such a pleasure. Where did the time go?
I know. There's so much I need to look up now. I think I'm going to have my evening viewing for me. This is I will let you know what I think about this. You'll be getting an email from me.
Let me know, because it's like it was shocking to see this episode again, having just seen that thing. You'll see what I mean. It's like it's the documentary version of Covenant.
Jeez, just no Asgard walking out from behind a door.
Almost. Gosh. I mean, it's like if that had happened, it would not have been surprising. That's what's talking about it.
Oh, jeez. I appreciate your time, sir.
All right, David. You take care. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
I know.
That is Charles Shaughnessy, Alec Colson in Stargate SG-1. What a privilege to have that gentleman on. My name is David Reed. You're watching the Stargate Oral History Project. A couple of questions for me real quick. River's Diary. Was Colson's office the top part of the Atlantis set before it became Atlantis? Yes and no. It had already become Atlantis. The pilot had featured elements of the Blade set. Supposedly it was transferred over to Stargate Productions for $1 Canadian. But that was, they didn't tear it down after the Blade film had completed at Bridge Studios. And so it was used for everything. I think Heitmeyer's office, it goes in and out. And actually the railing on the balcony of Atlantis outside of the main gate room, they reflected that design because all of the balconies were from the Blade set. So they incorporated it into actually the new build of the Atlantis set. Second question, latest item you've added to your Stargate collection. This was purchased a while ago, but I'm waiting for it to come in. The Hero newspaper of the Volian newspaper that indicates the rioting after the Ashen have begun to sterilize the population. And that was really cool. That was, what episode was that? That was 2001. That's the new one. We have Kelly Vent joining us in about 47 minutes to talk about the return of Stargate, the return of Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich to the franchise as executive producers and what that could mean. I'm certainly hoping she's in for a cameo in the new franchise because she certainly had one in Origins, and it would just be, not the new franchise, the new series. And it would only be appropriate to have her back. But what else do we have coming up here? There's a number of different shows coming down the channel. Stargate Fan Creations 2025. So it's going to be our year-end review of different things that we found online that we would like to share with you. Stargate Trivia with Kevin Otsuji, live December the 7th at 2 p.m. Pacific. That is going to be a bit of a rematch between three of us, myself, Jacob, and Kevin. There was a scoring error, and so this is like an emergency trivia to settle it, and these are going to be fast. There was a short that I put out, a vertical short, a couple of weeks ago, and this thing is going to match that intensity. So I hope Kevin knows what he signed up for. And then Amaterasu herself, Kira Clavel, she's going to be joining us December the 9th at 11:30 in the morning. December the 9th, that's going to be next Tuesday. And then I wrap for a few weeks. So a number of these episodes are going to be in season 6, and a couple are going to be slotted in before the end of the year as time permits with everything else going on. This is an exciting time for Stargate fans, and I really appreciate you all tuning in. It means a lot to have you. My tremendous thanks to my moderating team. You guys pull this off week in and week out. Anthony, Jeremy, Kevin, Lockwatcher, Marcia, Raj, and Jacob. My producers, Anthony Rowling, Kevin Weaver, Summer Roy, Bryce Orrs. I neglected to mention, I keep forgetting to add Enigma and Steven. You know what? Let me just do that right now while I'm on air. Control S. Perfect. And thanks to Matt Eagle SG Wilson for his beautiful opening sequences. We've got a couple more heading your way before the season winds down. A certain gold ship and perhaps an Asgard ship as well. And to Frederick Marcoux at Concepts Web, keeping dialthegate.com up and running, and hopefully new paint job very soon and a couple of features. Thanks for tuning in. My tremendous thanks to Charles Shaughnessy once again. My name is David Reed for Dial the Gate. I appreciate you tuning in, and I'll see you on the other side.